What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. We're bringing in our buddy Brian Hoyer today because you look at a win like Sunday's, and Brian has been on so many teams in so many different situations. I think he's going to be great at articulating how we should process it. Because I'm kind of big on tamping down these watershed moments where we overblow the wins and we overblow the losses. And I really look at this game and I say, you don't want to get too giddy over this one. You got giddy over the Bengals. You got giddy over the Jets. And last year you got giddy over a 25-22 win over the Bills. And really what they were, especially in the case of the Bills, that was dead cat bounce. You ever heard of dead cat bounce? I'm sure you have.
No, I'm still trying to figure out your sayings from last night on the post game show, but I'll learn it.
Um, but this is a team, Brian, that's trying to still get a foothold.
Hmm.
And we don't know exactly what they are. What can we take from yesterday's win? Is it a glimpse of potential, or is it just pummeling a bad team that's worse off than you are?
Well, I think you hit on it last night. You said, sometimes the Patriots have kind of been that get back on track team on other team schedules. And oddly enough, their 3 wins, they've all been underdogs. So, I think it's something to be excited about. It's something to see how they're responding. And you and I spoke on it last night on the show. I think this is a validation of Jerod Mayo, especially after the team is soft or playing soft, however you want to
Mm-hmm.
interpret that. They have responded and come out and beat the Jets when no one expected them to. That was after the Jets went all in and traded for Devontae Adams. They fired Saleh. They re-signed Hassan Reddick. All of those things, and then they probably should have won the Tennessee Titans game, but this is the NFL, and if you don't show up and make the plays when you need to make them, and look, Drake had a tremendous play in that game to get him to overtime, and they weren't able to get it done, but those were steps, some of those steps in the right direction. Then to go out there yesterday and basically, I think the biggest thing that I took away was the defensive game plan. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of credit to obviously Gerard and DeMarcus Covington and then those guys going out and executing it. We see a guy like Brendan Schooler out there in a specific package, getting his first sack, spying the quarterback. I mean, those are adjustments that you make, and that's where as a player, and we have always heard it, you guys have heard it, like don't believe the noise, don't fuel the hype. Like the players on the inside, they just go about their business. Now, the media, it's our job now to critique everything one way or
Mm-hmm.
the other. And so I don't think this is a watershed moment. I don't think this is like a rubber stamp, like they've got everything fixed type game, but
Right.
it goes a long way, I think, in the locker room because it validates, the tough times. And now you go and you beat a team pretty handily. And I think it's also big because it was really Drake's first win. I mean, if we go back
And
to the Jets game, Jacoby came in at halftime. So this
I
was the
want to
first time where he, started a game, finished a game, and they won.
I want to hit Drake in a second, but I love that point about Mayo because there was so much scrutiny nationally
Hmm.
here. Was this a landmine he stepped on? Did he just blow himself up? Is he going to be able to come back
Sure.
from this kind of a commentary? Is he going to lose his locker room? Is he finger pointing? And it was something that he said that he actually tried to stuff back into the toothpaste was out of the tube and he's trying to put it back in the next day. And I get the concept of what he was saying. They're not soft. I was saying they're playing soft. That's not who we are. But in between these messages that Gerard sometimes has missteps on, it does seem as if the players do take his intentions to heart in a specific way, and there's no mistaking that they've played well since he said that.
Yeah,
No
100%.
mistaking it.
Yeah, when we saw some of the veteran guys come out and kind of confirm and say, Gerard's right. I don't think they took that personally. I think it's kind of like when I'm a parent and my son has bad behavior and I say you're being bad. Doesn't mean you're a bad kid. It means your behavior is bad. And sometimes the wording, my wife has to correct me and say, you need to say it differently. But I think, Gerard's a passionate, competitive person who played the game and played the game in a very tough, call it tough era
Yes.
and a tough mentality. And so that's what he saw and he said it. And, for so long, the people around here didn't get anything out of the head coach when it came to the media. And I think Gerard's gone in a completely different direction. You kind of touched on that, things he'll learn from. I think he'll learn that those are the things that maybe take a deep breath. Maybe it's not time to say it. Maybe you sit there and you watch the film and you reanalyze it and say, okay, we played soft. We aren't a soft team. But I think the key to the whole scenario, and if you're not in the local media and seeing what the players respond, if you just read that headline, Mayo calls team soft, and you don't see any of the response from the players, you may say, oh, that's he could lose
That's a
the
bad
team.
idea.
But when you see guys like Dietrich Wise and Jonathan Jones and Hunter Henry and those guys who come out and say, we got to do a better, like they take the accountability, and that just shows me that they believe in Jerod. They are playing. He hasn't lost anything. So and they've responded since then.
And so that note of leadership was struck by Mayo. We come to find out in the post game yesterday that Drake Maye, speaking to the team on Wednesday, asking for the opportunity to do so, was also another note of leadership. You know, Robert Kraft told me, and he said it publicly, he said it to me privately, you're nothing if you don't have your coaching quarterback. So that's what the Patriots are seeking, at least in terms of leadership and the team being with them at this juncture. They are with coach and quarterback. What did Mays putting his hand up to address the team last week say to you about where he is on that curve of becoming a franchise quarterback?
Yeah, I think he understands the role that he has now. I think, obviously the way things played out this year, he didn't start the season. And that's always, you never want to step on the guy who's starting. You never want to step on his toes. And so I think now he's played a few games. He's got a few success plays and things that have gotten people excited about him underneath his belt. And, to hear him talk about, I felt like we weren't practicing well. I fumbled a snap, things to reset. I think that's a huge sign of maturity and ownership of, because that's what you, as a quarterback, you have to take ownership of everything. The players, the scheme, the defense. Your job is to take ownership and then let that trickle down to the rest of the guys. And so I'm sure that's, as a young kid at 22 years old, you got to look past that, and you got to look, well, I may be younger than all these guys, but my role is the role of the leader, the one voice that's going to be in that huddle. And so I think that's a great sign for him and for the team that he feels compelled and then willing to go do that, because I don't think anyone probably sat there and was like, oh man, what's this rookie talking about? Because he's gone out there and earned their respect.
But he also slow played it.
Yeah.
And that's what impressed me the most is he didn't come in big old swinging Richard and saying, I'm in charge here. I'm the number 3 overall pick. Jacoby's a placeholder. We understand what the future is. So you guys better start paying attention to me. He didn't come in like Caleb Williams texting the punter and saying, hey, just so you know, we're not going to punt much this year. He respected the whole process until the Patriots actually had to go to him, Brian, and say, buddy, could use you to be a little bit more assertive. You are supposed to be the backup until further notice, but you're supposed to push Jacoby too. And that really happened. And Phil Perry reported it. Jerod Mayo spoke about it. And really since that time in late August, that's when his play kind of took off, when the Patriots said, go ahead and be the franchise quarterback. He's like, okay, I was just waiting for you to tell me.
Yeah, no, I like his demeanor. He's he comes across as a very humble person. And at a quarterback position, obviously I'm biased because I was in there day in, day out with the greatest of all time, and he couldn't have been more humble. It's funny, I just saw a clip of him, and oddly enough, it was when he played for the Buccaneers, but after they beat the Packers to go to the Super Bowl. And that was kind of the COVID year. And he went over to the stands, and he's asking the usher, can I see my son? And I'm thinking to myself, like, I wouldn't ask, you wouldn't think to ask anybody.
Bring me my son.
Yeah, like with the humbleness of like, no one owes me anything. And I think you kind of feel that from Drake too. Like, okay, I'm gonna do the right thing. I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna do the right thing. And then when it becomes my time, you don't want to force it. You don't ever want to come across as fake. And so I think, there's sometimes you feel like you get a feeling like this is the right time to address the team. And clearly he felt comfortable doing that, and he did it. And I think it's, if anything, those guys look and see, that's not an easy thing to do as a young player, and that gains more respect as you go along.
What did the offensive plan on Sunday tell you about Alex Van Pelt and the system that he's installing? He had first down success. He had play action success. He had wide zone success. And we talked about this in the post game, and I thought it was really instructive because they're building a house here and the foundation's being laid. And are they getting to the framing now, or?
Yeah, I think AVP has done a good job, especially with all of the disruption along the offensive line when it comes to injuries, dealing with some young guys in the skill position. Obviously, you start with a veteran quarterback, you transition to a rookie quarterback who's maybe a little bit of a different skill set. And so I think he's managed that pretty well. And I would say that there was pretty much a dynamic shift once Drake took over. It was more in the shotgun. It wasn't as much as outside zone. And so whether that's because Drake's more comfortable doing that, they made that change. And it was nice to see when, when Drake goes down, they kept that mentality with Jacoby and let him kind of drop back and make some great throws, which he was able to do and lead that drive to win against the Jets. So sometimes you have to figure out the identity of not only what your scheme is, but who your players are. And then that
Mhm.
sometimes can dictate. So we see a lot more of inside zone and gap runs as opposed, they'll mix in some of the outside zone. I think Ramondre had one or two yesterday that were decent runs, but you realize who your players are, what they're capable of doing. And I think the biggest thing yesterday that I really liked, and we talked about it, was trying to get the run game going. Because that's one thing that since Drake's started, they really haven't had that. And I think that takes some of that pressure off of a rookie quarterback. And you get to be able to stay on track. Like you mentioned, the first down plays, no negative plays. They also cut back on the penalties. I think that's one of the things that
Yes.
killed them against the Titans.
Wasn't
I
it
think it was
wild? You
eight
kept
holding.
waiting for flags after good plays. You're like,
Right.
no, no flag. Wow.
Yeah, well, it's interesting on my podcast I do with David Andrews. I said, David, one thing I wanted to ask you as an offensive lineman perspective, when you have a guy who's a more of a mobile quarterback, offensive line, genuinely, if you have a drop back guy, you know where the quarterback's going to be. When a quarterback starts running around, escaping the pocket, you're going to have to realize if I got my guy and I'm in good position, and all of a sudden he goes away that I'm not expecting him, like I got to let go because that means Drake has now escaped the pocket and he's got to handle it on his own now. If that's what's going to happen. So I think those are things that they'll adjust over time with Drake and the way he plays. If you're blocking your guy and you feel like you got him and all of a sudden he's going away you're not expecting him to go,
Yep.
you got to let go and let Drake handle it with his legs and his athletic ability. And David mentioned that too, because for so long he was so used to having a guy that was just going to be 6 yards, 7 yards behind the center. Now you have a guy with some athleticism who's going to use those skills to get out of the pocket. Now you have to kind of be conscious of, man, if I'm blocking someone and I have them really good, let them go. If they start to go away that I'm not expecting them, just let them go and let Drake handle it.
I mean, you look at how many holding calls come when a quarterback breaks the pocket
Hmm.
and runs, like, say, if the left tackle has somebody walled off and all of a
Yep.
sudden the quarterback runs left and goes outside, then you see the jersey
The
tug
jersey.
because the
Yep.
left tackle's like, oh shit, man, you're going to the area that I had
Secured.
that I left open because you
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
you were here.
Right.
It's really fascinating to see that how that has to work. This is still a team, though, Brian, that scored over 20 points just 3 times. It's got a high of 25 on the season against the Jets. This roster is going to get churned. The coaching staff is probably going to get churned. Brian Dayball's taking on water in New York. Josh McDaniels is not working right now. Don't know what the plans are for either of those guys. Don't know what the plans are for the Patriots. But if this team continues to be a team that's finding its way, should it fast track improvement for Drake Maye and say we have to do more for him than Alex is offering? It's a very hard spot because the guy
Yeah.
is doing an excellent job with what he's been afforded, but is he doing the best job possible? I'm asking you to just hypothesize.
I mean, you could go a lot of different ways with it because then you're also thinking, okay, now Drake has to learn an entire new system. I mean, there's so many ways to look at it. Like I said, I think AVP's done a great job with what he's been afforded when it comes to the players, understanding who's good at what. I think they've done a tremendous job of involving the tight ends because the tight ends have become two of the most reliable guys in the pass game. And then last week with the running game, I think there's always this thing where you're trying to figure out who you are. Not, and this is really AVP's first time calling plays. So I would say it's gotten better over the as the year has gone on, a better feel for what those guys do, a better feel for what Drake does really well. And so you could say that, but then it's like, okay, you bring somebody else in. Yeah, Drake has a year under his belt, but now he's starting from ground zero. I think the one thing that I always compared during my career was the Patriots system was in place for so long. And when you have that, you get to work on things that other teams who are just installing their foundation don't get to work on. You get to work on
Mm-hmm.
situational play in the offseason. I mean, our practices in OTAs, we were going over stuff that other teams may not get to till year 3 or 4 when they've become established. So you have to weigh that too. Like if Drake has an ownership over the system, the play calls, all of those things, How much better could it be in his second year? How much better is it in all of those guys' second year under that same system, as opposed to, okay,
Restart.
yeah, restart. So it's all of those things you have to weigh when it comes to that decision.
Patriots didn't get their third win until December 7th last year. You actually quarterbacked a win against the Patriots for the Raiders last year.
Mm-hmm.
Are the 2024 Patriots better than the 2023 Patriots when you look at them right now?
I think in some areas they are, in some areas they aren't. And I would say the reason they aren't is because of injury. When I played against them last year, yeah, Judon wasn't playing and Gonzalez was hurt, but they still had Barmore, they had Bentley. I mean, the one thing that you talk about on their defense is three of their kind of cowbell guys at each level, Barmore, Bentley, Peppers, are all not playing right now. And so other guys are having to fill in. And we saw them do a tremendous job yesterday. Not just, I mean, Jeremiah Farm stepped up. Keon
Mm-hmm.
White's been a great player all year. Brendan Schooler getting in there. Duggar's not
Mapu,
playing. Mapu's in there. I mean,
Del
they've
Pettis.
they've yeah, they've dealt with a lot of injuries, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And then the offensive side of the ball, the offensive line has been reshuffled and you know tossed out multiple times. So I think in some areas I say they're better, some areas not so good. And so like we always, Bill would always get up there and tell us at the beginning of the year, like every season is different. Just because you did something the year before doesn't mean it's going to happen this year. Other people, there's going to be turnover. And so I assume like every year there'll be turnover, but I think with the Patriots, you'll see a lot of turnover because we talked about it last night in the post game show. You're not going to make the playoffs. So from here on out, they're gauging what guys do we want on our roster? What are our core guys going to be? And I'm not talking about the superstar players, the quarterback, the Christian Gonzalez. Who are the guys that we want that fit our mold of the culture we're trying to build? Like, okay, the season's not gone the way you want it to go. Who's going to keep fighting through? Who's going to continue to come in every day and try to get better? And those are the guys you're going to want around. And the guys who maybe, fall by the wayside because
Mm-hmm.
the season isn't going the way they want, then those are the people you weed out.
There's a really interesting roster difference between the Bears and the Patriots. They're picking number one overall, but they had timed it up so
Yeah.
that they weren't the worst team in the league, but they had that pick. When you look at their roster, they have Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, DeAndre Swift, Cole Kmet. Those guys yesterday had 14 catches for 110 yards of the 16 completions. They are consuming $52 million in cap space, those players. Caleb Williams is the number one overall pick, but he's surrounded by these players who are so veteran and have had so much success and have their view of how a team should look. You now have them under the leadership of a first year and young offensive coordinator in Shane Waldron. It is, and that's why I look at Alex Van Pelt when they hired him. I'm like, good, they need a 50-year-old plus guy. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
into the ages. I'm getting older myself. I don't want people saying get him out because he's old. And I don't want to hear people saying get him out because he's young. But I do think that having an experienced, even tempered guy like Alex Van Pelt helps. And I think that you can look at that Chicago example of just the whole dynamic and chemistry and say, he might be in for it for a little bit. Caleb Williams, I mean, here, May is the hood ornament. He's the big toe. He's the head honcho, the capo, the tutti capo. It's really, he is already a franchise quarterback. And the 30% of the roster that comes in next year is going to look and go, oh, that's the guy in charge.
Yeah, I think the one thing, and we talked about it last night too, on paper, you say, okay, Caleb Williams have all of these veteran guys. It's going to really help him. But the one thing about Caleb Williams is he plays the game in a very unique way. And so these receivers who, okay, Keenan Allen has played with Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers was going to play on time if Keenan Allen was open using the ball. Same thing with Justin Herbert. That DJ Moore hasn't had the same continuity at the quarterback position. So, maybe he's a little more, I don't want to say used to it, but clearly he's the one who says, you can see with his body language is not appreciative of when he's open, he wants the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Caleb Williams isn't always the guy who's going to play on time, um, you know, go through his reads. He plays the game a very unique way. And so when those
Mm-hmm.
receivers, they run a route and they know that they're supposed to get the ball, and all of a sudden he's back there scrambling, and now they got to run extra yards. Maybe they get the ball, maybe they don't. Come back to the huddle, do it over and over again. That's a way that those guys could be frustrated. Whereas I feel like, and we talked about this last week, like who would you take? Drake Maye, while he is athletic, plays within the confines of the offense in the game a lot more than Caleb Williams does. And so, and on the same sense, he's not having these young guys that are going to be, giving them an attitude if he's not getting them the ball
Right.
because they don't know any better. But these older guys, they know better, especially a Keenan Allen who has been, with a lot of great quarterbacks throughout his career. And so, yeah, in theory, you're like, oh, he's got more help. But in a way, if things aren't going well, it can actually be a detriment.
Yeah. And I really think that they got the right guy. I think everybody in the region has now said it at this point, but they just got the right guy in terms of maturity and responsibility and just I like the cut of his jib. Last question. I just reeled through some top five, top three-ish picks. You got Josh Allen, Matthew Stafford, Daniel Jones, I think he was sixth, Mac Jones, 15th, Trevor Lawrence, Bryce Young, Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson, Mitch Trubisky, Jared Goff. Drake Maye is truly, Brian, trying to buck the odds as a top five pick to become an elite quarterback. I mean, Josh Allen hasn't been to a Super Bowl. Stafford had to get to one with his second team, and
Yeah.
and fortunately for
Well,
him,
Goff got there with his first team and they traded him.
yeah. So he's really trying to buck the odds here. Despite his success over the past 4 weeks and his first win, you still look at the whole situation and say, we're barely out of base camp here.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's you just named off all of those guys. I mean, the thing I would say about the quarterback position is so much about timing and who you're with, your coaches, your players. The stars really have to align. I mean, if you look at Tom Brady, I mean, he came in and early on in his career, he wasn't this offensive star, but he played very smart, manageable football. The defense kind of, and then at some point it started to shift. I would say, Mahomes is kind of the rarity, right? He kind of sits out his first year, and then the next year he comes out guns blazing, and it's all of a sudden like, where did this offense come from? Because he could do unique things. And so I think so much when you're a high draft pick quarterback, that usually means you're going to a team that's maybe in a rebuild
Yep.
situation. You're not going. That's why Lamar Jackson, getting drafted at the end of the draft to a Ravens organization who had, not too far before that had won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco and kind of working him into what it is. And now here he is. He's an MVP, multiple MVP. They're rolling again. I think so much of fostering that environment for a quarterback is continuity. So like we just talked about, do you keep the coordinator? What
Yes.
about the players around him? It's so much, I think obviously it's a quarterback driven league and we all love to watch these guys, but the reality is, yes, if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance. But also, just because you have a quarterback doesn't mean that there's this automatic road
Like
to
Dak.
success. Yeah,
Look at Dak
right.
Prescott. I mean, how does he avoid becoming Daniel Jones, Mitchell Trubisky? Um, I could say Dak. I mean, when you really look at Dak, he's won one playoff game. He throws for
Hmm.
4,500 yards most years. He'll throw
Yep.
38 touchdowns sometimes, but there is a ceiling that you perceive when you watch Dak Prescott. At least I always have.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
think
mean,
it, I think it goes back to a game in the rain that the Patriots and Cowboys played. You remember that a couple of years ago?
2019, right? I wasn't here, but
Oh, I'm
yeah,
like, he couldn't score if
yeah.
you left him on the field for 5 hours. So
Well, that's what's so admirable about Tom because, and you've covered the Patriots. You said last night since 1997, so
1997,
you
Brian.
were even around way more than I was. But I can't think to one game where Tom went out and lost a game for the team. I literally can't think, and maybe you can, but he was so good at playing the game the right way, whatever that was. If he had to throw for 500 yards, then he had to throw for 500 yards. If he had to protect the football and hand it off a bunch of times and throw for 100, I mean, he always gave his team a chance to win. And that's to me sometimes in this era, you depend so much on the quarterback that the quarterback feels like he has to alter the game
Yes.
and doesn't because to me the one thing that I love about football is it's the ultimate team sport. And yes, the quarterbacks get a lot of glory, but the reality is, and Tom would get up there and say it every press conference, I need the other 10 guys around me to do their job the right way. And when that happens, when we all 11 guys do their job, then it's going to be a successful day. And if there's more plays where you're not all on the same page, then it's going to be a tough day. And that's the one thing that's great. And like we said, we all like to see these guys, the Josh Allens, the Drake Mays, the Mahomes, the Lamar Jacksons, because
Mm-hmm.
the ball's in their hands on every single play. So something's going to happen. You know what I mean? And the guys who make more things happen for their team than the other, then you always give your team a chance. But ultimately, every season is going to win with one winner and 31 losers. And Bill used to say that to us. Like, if you lose the Super Bowl, it's just like you had just never even made it to the playoffs, because ultimately 31 teams season ends in a crash landing. That's what he used to say. And
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing more true than that. And that's why I think there will never be a quarterback like Tom ever again, because he did it so consistently. That's the
Yeah.
biggest thing. The consistency is to be able to do it year in, year out. 10 Super Bowls he went to. How many AFC or NFC championship games in a career? More than 50% of the time he was there. And it's not just because of him. He was on great teams, but maybe he rose the level of those teams' play because of who he was too. So
It's
so much goes into it.
it does, and I think there was one play yesterday. I can't even remember the time and situation. It was late in the game. I think they were up 16-3, and May had to scramble, and he could have been a little bit more inventive with what he did, but he just took like a 3-yard drop off to Jermichael Hasty or
Mm-hmm.
Stevenson or somebody, just a little simple one, which was, I thought, don't be a hero, just give it off, get the
Yep.
ball out, get the 4-yard gain. Who cares? And that type of thing is, unfortunately, sometimes you can look at it as an anomaly
Mm-hmm.
because these quarterbacks are told, look, you're making $50 million a year. You are our guy. We are wedded to you, Tua. We are wedded to you, Dak. We are wedded to you, Trevor Lawrence.
Yep.
So go be special.
Yeah.
And
Well, do you remember what Tom said in his Hall of Fame induction speech? To be great, you don't have to be special. And that really resonated with me, because Bill, even when he got up there and spoke, he said there was never a greater quarterback that avoided bad plays as well as Tom Brady. He knew he was getting sacked. He knew where the running back was to throw the ball at the guy's feet, to instead of losing 6 yards, beating it was zero. I mean, he was just so in tune with those things that it really, I mean, I was obviously so fortunate to be there so for so many years, day in and day out, to watch him. And I tried to recreate that. I tried to take those lessons, but unfortunately, it didn't always just pan out that way for me. And that's just the way that the cards are dealt. But he, yeah, I don't. I know we're getting off on the Tom Brady tangent, but there's things like that that the average fan may not see how valuable those plays are. So, like you said, checking it down to Hasty, as opposed to trying to scramble around and you lose 12 yards on a sack or throw it up for an interception.
yeah,
All of
or
those
like some
things.
fake throw to Hasty and then see if
Right.
I can cut back and get 7 over here. And you get absolutely labeled by a safety that you didn't
Yeah.
see. Just
Right.
get the hell out of there. Get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
I'm
Yep.
going to let you get the hell out of there. Brian, your podcast, again, for the folks who haven't yet heard it, it's
Yeah.
fantastic with David Andrews.
Thank you. It's called The Quick Snap. It's amazing when you go to start a podcast, you try to think of all these inventive names and you realize, oh man, they're all taken. So we try to have a little play on the quarterback center exchange. So the Quick Snap podcast, which was pretty innovative, especially around here, having a guy who was an active player. I mean, that would have never happened a few years ago when Bill was the
No,
head coach. It's been fun. Unfortunately, David was hurt, which allows him to be a little more of a contributing member to that, now that he can help analyze some other games in the NFL. And we have fun with it. And I think the fans will love the stories we tell. We have great guests. Today we had Joe Cardona in honor of Salute to Service, obviously a Navy guy. So a good interview there, and check it out. I think it's all places with podcast, Spotify, YouTube, all of those things. So thanks for having me.
Brian, you're fantastic. We are all getting a hell of a lot smarter. We really appreciate having you around. Thanks again, bud.
All right. Thanks, Tom.